Chapter 1. Clarification of the different cultivation levels. Author note. To clarify the different cultivation levels. Level 0, Apprentice. Level 1, Basic Cultivator. Level 2, Elite Cultivator. Level 3, Grand Cultivator. Level 4, Adept. Level 5, Elite Adept. Level 6, Grand Adept. For Level 1 to 3, they are considered at the Cultivator tier. For Level 4 to 6, they are considered at the Adept tier. There will still be the Legendary tier, Demigod tier, and even higher tiers which would be slowly revealed in the future. Chapter 2. Legend of the Mythological Genes. Every single legend is a path to reach godhood. Your genes exist together with you. The myriad of life forms exist solely because of their genes. Genetics is the origin of life for all living things. They look like a macromolecule formed of 4 different kinds of deoxynucleotides, but they consist of all the information necessary for life. When speaking from a larger perspective, it dictates the form and function of the 5 organs and 4 limbs. When speaking from a smaller perspective, it controls every single strand of hair and the multitude of tiny pores on our body. On the planet of humans, Mother Earth, it is very tough to imagine that in some ancient primordial eras long ago, ancient civilizations dazzled brilliantly and thrived far beyond the modern era. Among the ancients, there were some humans who possessed transcendent might and were named by the vast majority of humanity as gods. As for the genes of gods, modern humans have also inherited them. If one wanted to become an interstellar cultivator, the first thing one must do is to awaken his or her own set of mythological genes and obtain transcendent strength. In a classroom full of futuristic technological sensations, a group of uniformed students was currently attending a theory class on mythological genes. A holographic projection floated in front of everyone, and the content of the lesson flowed into their minds like a waterfall of information. Although theory classes were dry and boring, everyone was focused as they listened intently. Information about mythological genes would affect whether they would be able to become cultivators or not. Nobody dared to be lazy or careless. The gaze of the female teacher on the rostrum was strict. She gazed at the surroundings and nodded her head when she saw how serious her students were. A conspicuous figure caught her attention. This person was different from the other students who were seriously listening. He was slumping over his desk and was in a deep sleep, ignoring all external things. In his dream, it was unknown what terrifying things he encountered. His brows were furrowed and sweat dotted his forehead. Strange mumblings could be heard occasionally from him as well. Astronomic calendar, year 9991. What era is this? Why did the set of memories belonging to someone else appear in my mind? Can it be that I somehow crossed over to some other dimension? The volume of his voice was very small, his words indistinct. Nobody knew what he was talking about. So it is him. The last-ranking student of the 17th class, Feng Lin. The brows of the female teacher had initially been furrowed in displeasure, and she had already been prepared to rage. But when she recognized the student, all her anger dissipated. She only shook her head and no longer paid any attention to him. Mourn for the unfortunate, anger for the cowardice. To awaken one's mythological genes, talent was undoubtedly required. Although people in the interstellar era could all awaken their genes, there was still a large disparity between the set of genes they awakened. There were some genes that were completely useless and might even have adverse effects after being awakened. For example, a human growing a monkey tail, black fur, a 6th finger digit, all sorts of weird effects were present. These genes would only bring harm to oneself if they were awakened. And as for some other genes, humanity would begin to transcend themselves once the genes were awakened. They would be able to control the wind, rain, thunder, magnetic force, and gravity. They would become extraordinary creatures capable of controlling mysterious energy sources. For these genes that would benefit humanity, these were known as the legendary mythological genes. Undoubtedly, genes were the greatest talent humanity had. This Feng Lin, the genes he had awakened were the lowest tiered and most basic set of genes, namely the monkey gene. Recently, it was rumored that he somehow awakened another set of genes just before the college entrance exam. The second set of genes he awakened was also one of the lowest tiered and most basic kind, known as the stone-birth gene. According to current research, there wasn't any information that the monkey gene and the stone-birth gene would be able to evolve into a higher-tiered gene set. In other words, these two sets of genes were basically trash. Right now, Feng Lin's vitality stats was only at 0.4, not even reaching 1 yet. He was already in his senior year and about to graduate high school, yet he didn't even have the qualifications to take the college entrance exam. Feng Lin's potential was merely so. From the current looks of things, he didn't seem to have a future. In just an instant, the female teacher already judged Feng Lin as trash in her heart. In the interstellar era, it was the greatest misfortune for humans not to have gene talent. This Feng Lin was completely inept, even wanting to laze around and sleep during class, not bothering to work hard at all. But naturally, it would be useless even if you worked hard. Talent wasn't something that one could gain just by working hard. Right now, it seemed that Feng Lin had already thoroughly given up on himself, becoming complete trash. The female teacher shifted her eyes away, no longer sparing a glance at Feng Lin. This lesson ended quickly, and the students all left one by one. No one bothered to look at Feng Lin. No one bothered to even wake him up. Very swiftly, the classroom was emptied of people. It was unknown how long later before that sleeping young man lifted his heavy head. He glanced at the strange and unfamiliar classroom as a perplexed look could be seen in his eyes. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where the hell is this place? This classroom, filled with holographic projections and future tech. There were even flying cars zooming past the classroom's windows. Was this a dream? But it seemed like reality. Or was this a sci-fi movie? Without time to ponder, countless fragments of memories flooded his mind. An intense pain wrecked his brain. Feng Lin's expression contorted. He only managed to draw in a breath after a long time. But now, his expression became exceedingly fascinating to behold. So it turned out that right now, it was already the year of 9991, AC, astronomic calendar. After he graduated from university, he got himself drunk and only God knows why, he suddenly woke up in this interstellar era. Was this a parallel universe? Or his world in the future? He was completely oblivious. But the truth might not be considered important to Feng Lin. He had already crossed over to another world, and it was highly probable that he wouldn't be able to return. It was meaningless to harp over these little details. According to interstellar history, in the Gregorian calendar year of 2160 AD, humans finally exited the confines of Earth and began to colonize the solar system. To commemorate this great occasion, mankind changed calendars. They abandoned the Gregorian calendar of the ancient Earth era and pushed the calendar with quantum computers to be more in line with cosmic time. That was the first year of the astronomic calendar, AC. It had been 9,991 years now. This meant that, counting from the year 2018 AD, from the time period he crossed over, it had already been slightly over 10,000 years. Was this a dream? For a period of time, Feng Lin suddenly went into a trance. Stepping into the interstellar era, the development of humans' technology was unimaginably quick and explosive. By 3628 AC, humans had completely conquered the solar system. all the planets within the solar systems had human bases on them. The fiery and dried-up Mars had been modified into a lush green planet, capable for lives to exist. A space station floated above the enormous Jupiter. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter was filled with ore-mining spaceships, and Pluto, that was at the edge of the solar system, became a planet that humans visited for holidays. The footprints of humanity spread to every corner of the solar system, but humanity was trapped as well. Humans' technology was developed to its peak and also encountered a hard-to-break bottleneck. Outside the solar system was the dark void of the universe. Several tens of light-years were obstacles that humanity couldn't cross. Only more than 3,000 years later, countless generations of scientists had kept on working on research, and humanity's science and technology encountered a giant breakthrough, granting them the wormhole technology which resulted in humanity finally making it out of the solar system. In the boundless outer space, treasures were everywhere. There were countless celestial bodies and energy sources. However, even before the beautiful dream of humanity started, the dream was completely destroyed as the true nightmare started to descend. Humans discovered that the solar system wasn't just their prison, it was also their protective umbrella. The horrendous monsters of the other planets, the millions of species of alien life forms, and the cosmic disasters that destroyed heaven and earth. They had all emerged. Humanity was instantly devastated. However, amidst the chaotic battles, humanity was evolving as well. And at this moment, humans discovered to their joy and sorrow that when compared to the boundlessly vast expanse of the universe, human beings themselves were the greatest treasures. Back in the ancient Earth era, those ancient legends about gods were refuted and debunked as superstition. But at the interstellar era, humanity discovered to their amazement that these myths and legends of gods were actually real. They were all real. These characters in the legend were all powerful existences in ancient civilizations. According to scientific calculations and computer simulations, these people in the past were revered as gods because of their extraordinary powers. With the demise of civilizations, the mythical figures in these legends had vanished completely, nowhere to be traced. However, their genes still remained inside the genetic pool of human beings. Humans could awaken their genes through cultivations and gain incredible powers. Hence, these particular set of genes were known as mythological genes. The human body was like a miniature universe. Every single gene was like the stars in the sky, countless in number. Ancient cultivation techniques sparked the hidden potential of humans. Every single legend was a path to reaching godhood. Path to godhood? Feng Lin mumbled, chewing on the words. He could clearly sense the mysterious meaning contained within. This body he was in now was also named Feng Lin. He was a high school senior of class 17 and a very ordinary student. Even his appearance was somewhat similar to him of the past. After more than 10,000 years of development, after humanity had experienced 3 world wars, 2 planetary wars, 5 interstellar wars, and many civilization disasters, nobody paid any attention to the myths and legends of the ancient Earth era. Only a minority of the myths and legends still remained, and there were only a word or two, or a few isolated phrases discussing them. The information wasn't complete and were all mixed up in a dreadful mess. The humans of the ancient Earth era left a huge blank space for the humans of the interstellar era to excavate and research. Nowadays, they were exploring the vestiges and traces of the ancient myths and legends. Although humans knew of the existences of these myths and legends, these inheritances were all long severed. They had no way to crack the code of their genes. The path to godhood was forgotten. Humans suffered under their own karma and had to seek out traces of the ancient path that was riddled with difficulty once more. However, Feng Lin discovered to his amazement that his knowledge became his greatest advantage. Originally, as a modern man of the 21st century being transported to this technologically advanced world, his knowledge and thought process were both far behind the people of this era. He initially was still worried that he had no way to establish himself in this world, but things were different now. This interstellar era actually began to formulate theories about unlocking mythological genes, but sadly, because of the long river of time, the ancient myths and legends were all already almost forgotten. Just so nicely, because he came from the past, Feng Lin was extremely knowledgeable about the myths and legends of the ancient Earth era. Every legend was a path to godhood. If this was truly the case, didn't it mean that he had in his grasps countless paths to godhood? Battle god of Huaxia, true lord Erlang, the great sage equal to heavens, Sun Wukong, demon subduing Jinwu emperor of the north. Saint of the west, Jesus. The evil devil, Satan. Ancestor of all vampires, Cain. Greeks king of gods, Zeus. The god of the sun, Apollo. The mother earth, Gaia. Northern Europe's Odin. Egypt's god of death, Anubis. India's lord of destruction, Shiva. All these myths and legends of gods were all almost completely forgotten now. Feng Lin drew in a deep breath. To him, undoubtedly, this was definitely the best era. Chapter 3: Exploitation by one's clan. Every single legend was a path to godhood. The myths and legends that had already almost completely disappeared in the interstellar era were actually extremely familiar to Feng Lin, who came from the past. Right now, his vitality was only at 0.4. He was far from meeting the average standard of vitality of the human beings in this era. But then, human beings of the ancient Earth era only had vitality stats of 0.1. Compared to his original Earth era's body, his constitution was now 4 times stronger. When vitality increased, one's memory would be strengthened. The strength and speed attributes, along with other physical aspects, would be strengthened as well. He might have already forgotten some of the stories about the myths and legends he had read before when he had been back on Earth, but they were definitely in some corners of his mind. Now, as long as he concentrated and tried to recall them, information about them would appear in his mind. The countless myths and legends in the ancient Earth era were all records of the secrets pertaining to ancient civilizations of Earth. Feng Lin could feel himself in control of countless paths leading to godhood. Countless thoughts appeared in his mind. He exited the school gate and sat on the magnetic levitation train as he returned home. Many thousand-story buildings resembled heavenly pillars leading up to the heavens. Flying cars with blazing trails of light and flames behind them soared through the air like comets. Intelligent robots were busy with their activities in every corner of the city. This was an unprecedented grand era. Conquering the starry skies, enjoying boundless resources, everyone could become dragons among humans. Even when Feng Lin had already gained the memory of this era's Feng Lin, he still felt extremely stunned when he personally saw all of this. The traveling speed of the maglev train was exceedingly fast, exceeding 3,000 kilometers per hour. He arrived home after 10 minutes. Feng Clan Grand Building. A gigantic silver building constructed from metal could be seen before his eyes. It was several hundreds of meters tall, akin to a small mountain, and appeared extremely majestic. Feng Lin furrowed his brows. A wave of uncomfortable memories involuntarily appeared in his mind. He got down from the train and walked inside. As he entered the building, a beam of red light fell down, shining upon him, scanning him inside out. Microchip scan is complete. Identity verified. A 9th-tier clansman, Feng Lin. Another door opened up after that, and Feng Lin stepped through it, arriving at a spacious living lounge. Numerous escalators could be seen connecting this level to different higher levels. The decorations here were gorgeous and elegant. There were swimming pools, cultivation rooms, massage rooms. There was everything here, allowing one to indulge themselves in supreme enjoyment should they wish to. There were several beautiful women in maid costumes walking around. This was simply like an imperial palace that had existed in feudal times. Feng Lin merely glanced at them once before retracting his gaze. He turned and walked towards a remote corner. Over here, an ancient-looking elevator could be seen, leading down to the basement. There were numerous high-spirited youths walking past him in the surroundings, all of them moving towards the higher levels of the building. From the beginning until now, no one spoke a single word to Feng Lin. They couldn't even be bothered to cast a glance at him. However, these people were all his clansmen. The interstellar age was an unprecedented grand era. The starry skies were without limit, the universe was infinite. There was boundless freedom here, as well as endless terror. The universe was so dark and cold, capable of devouring everything in our world. Terrifying interstellar monsters, savage alien life forms, every one of these could swallow humanity whole. The infinitely vast universe followed the darkest law of the jungle. Natural selection was prevalent and the survival of the strong was the truest rule. Not only was there competition between the different races, but everyone in the interstellar era was also competing against each other. The population of humanity had already reached several trillion and was at a staggering amount. The competition was just way too intense. Only the truly strong could pursue freedom. The weaklings had to huddle together for warmth and could only barely eke out a living by sticking together. Clan. This ancient social structure had been brought back and made popular in the interstellar era. Majority of people had to group together for the sake of survival. And as a result of over 10,000 years of development, the resources of Earth in the solar system had almost been completely exhausted. The space outside Earth had now transformed into a region known as the chaotic star region. It might as well only exist in name. Science and technology were considered more inferior compared to other planets, and chaos reigned supreme. A small clan was akin to a small-scale society, which also resembled the internal structure of an ant nest. All the clansmen had different talents, different capabilities, and different cultivations. They were suited for different jobs. Some people were like the industrious and silent worker ants. Some would be responsible for protecting the clan's interests just like soldier ants. There were also some who had higher status, possessing great authority and power. These existences were equivalent to the king and queen ants. The Feng clan on Earth was precisely a small clan like that. The clansmen of the Feng clan all resided in the silver metallic building named Feng Clan Grand Building, and the clansmen could be classified into 9 different tiers. The 9th-tier clansmen were considered the lowest grade, while the 1st-tier clansmen were the highest. Those with outstanding talent were considered superior, and they lived on the upper floors, enjoying the preferential emperor-like treatment. They didn't need to work hard and could enjoy free cultivation resources from the clan. They were like the proud children of the heavens. As for those with mediocre talent, their situation would be miserable as they resided in the harshest environment. After graduating from high school, it was very tough for them to have an opportunity to enter college. They usually would be sent to help the clan, following the distribution of work orders. Any product formed from the daily labor would all be given to the clan for free. They would only receive a pitiful amount of income every month that was barely enough to feed their family. However, the key was that no one wanted to leave. The situation outside was even harsher compared to living in the clan. If they left their clan, not only would they find it hard to provide for themselves, but they wouldn't even be able to guarantee their own safety. Although the life of remaining inside the clan was tough, the clansmen would receive the clan's protection and they wouldn't need to worry about the safety of their lives. The purpose of the clan doing this was because they wanted to gather the clan's resources and, hopefully, nurtured a true genius that could achieve interstellar travel. By then, they could become someone of the upper echelon among humans, making a profit for the clan and elevating the clan's status. The Feng clan was not the only one that was doing this, but this was also a true portrayal of countless small clans on Earth and other planets. Feng Lin was already a senior in his 3rd year in high school. His physique was thin and weak, his vitality was only 0.4, not even reaching 1.0. As one of the lowest of the low among 9th-tier clansmen, he naturally wouldn't even have a chance to enjoy cultivation resources. So, the place where he stayed in was the basement. Naturally, although it was a basement, it was an extremely vast underground space. There were all kinds of equipment here, including small-scale shopping malls, convenience stores, restaurants, everything. There were also many extensive tunnels that led to various places. Those living in the basement could be considered a small community, and several thousands of people could stay here. Interstellar technology was very well developed, and the population had exploded in numbers. Right now, on the tiny planet Earth, there were already over 26.8 billions of people. The buildings constructed above ground were built higher and higher, while they also extended deeper into the ground. For these basements, although there were artificial suns installed, how could the warmth and light, which the artificial suns provided, be comparable to natural sunlight? These underground communities were places where inferior people lived in. Those lofty high-tier clansmen would never come here. Feng Lin walked towards an escalator that brought him through a tunnel, leading to his home. Occasionally, there would be other people passing by him silently. The atmosphere here was a little depressing, and the expressions of everyone was numb. These people were all the lowest-tier clansmen of the Feng clan. Once, Feng Lin was also a part of them. A deep discomfort always surfaced in his mind when he thought about it. These people worked very hard, but the proceeds of their labor were all handed over to the clan, while they could only receive a meager salary. As time passed, all of these clansmen would definitely feel extremely depressed in their hearts. This was simply exploitation, stark naked exploitation. Feng Lin found it hard to imagine that humanity had already developed so far and reached the interstellar era, but such cruel scenes still occurred everywhere. And indeed, as long as there were differences in terms of social classes, there would definitely be exploitation. Heaven had never been far away from hell. Everyone was from the same clan, but there were 9 different tiers separating their existences. I must definitely get out of this predicament. Feng Lin silently mused. He was a man who was reconciled to mediocrity. He had lived a life before this, and this could be considered his second life. If he still didn't live more fascinatingly, assuming that there were others, wouldn't he have lost the face of those who had crossed over 2 worlds? Swiping his identity microchip at the door of a shabby-looking room, the tattered metal gate automatically swung open, revealing a crowded room of about 60 square meters. A middle-aged couple was busy with their tasks. Their faces were filled with wrinkles born from enduring the fatigue of many years. "You are back." Upon seeing Feng Lin returning, they inclined their heads and called out. After that, they lowered their heads again and got busy with their tasks once more. Feng Lin didn't mind. These were his parents of this lifetime. On the table, 5 bottles of dark and tasteless liquid could be seen. They were tonight's dinner. This kind of low-level nutrient solution was manufactured in batches through industrial synthesis and could barely supply someone with a day's worth of nutrients. However, it was as tasteless as water since there was no flavor at all. Naturally occurring foods were incomparably expensive. They weren't something Feng Lin's family could afford. Big brother. At this moment, 2 skinny and tiny figures rushed over. These 2 were fraternal twins, Feng Lin's younger brother Feng Cheng and younger sister Feng Xian. They were already 7 years of age and had always liked sticking close to their elder brother. After inheriting the memories of his original host, Feng Lin also inherited his emotions. Staring at his malnourished little siblings, sadness filled his heart. In his past life, he was the only child. He didn't expect to have a pair of younger siblings when he crossed over to this world. "Let's eat," his father, who had been silently working on his task, spoke quietly. As a poor family, it was already troublesome enough to provide for Feng Lin. Now, with an additional pair of mouths to feed, it was no wonder that Feng Lin's parents would have a perpetual bitterness on their faces throughout the year. The entire family was silent as they slowly sipped the bottles of the tasteless nutrient solution. Bang! All of a sudden, a projection manifested. An elderly with a cold face stood before everyone, staring down with disdain over Feng Lin's family. He didn't cast an additional glance at Feng Lin's parents. His eyes were like a hunting eagle flying through the air, staring at his prey. He then spoke, "Feng Lin, as a 9th-tier clansman, you are about to graduate. However, your vitality stats is only at 0.4, and it's completely impossible for you to become a cultivator. After you graduated, the clan will arrange you to work in an energy factory inside the clan. In a month, you can go there and start learning the ropes. In any case, you wouldn't make it to college. The clan has provided for you for so many years, and according to the clan's laws, you should start to produce contributions as early as possible. 70% of your salary will be paid to the clan, and you can keep the remaining 30%. From the start to the end, the elderly man didn't seek Feng Lin or his parents' approval. He was simply informing them, and they didn't have any chance for the slightest rebuttal. After speaking, the projection vanished. The atmosphere in the house grew even heavier and became somewhat stifling. Feng Chen and Feng Xian glanced at each other in dismay, but they didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. Feng Lin's parents had an even more bitter look on their faces. They drew in a deep breath and sighed, choosing not to say anything. They had long since been used to such a life, they had long learned not to resist. Born in the clan, they would die here within the clan as well. It had been so for generations. In the interstellar era, not having genetic talent was the greatest sin. If one wanted to escape this destiny of mediocrity, one had to display outstanding talent before they could obtain the heavy recognition of the clan and upgrade themselves to a higher tier, becoming an upper-class clansman. Facing the tragic fate that would soon happen to their son, they were helpless to change anything. They could only speak to their two other young children. You two must definitely work hard and awaken the powerful mythological genes. Only then would you be able to gain the clan's attention and become an interstellar cultivator, avoiding the fate that your elder brother would soon face. The fact that they failed to change their fates through the generations was like a heavy mountain pressing down on their family, causing them to be unable to breathe. Feng Lin stood in his original spot with his fists tightly clenched. A flash of determination could be seen in his eyes. Such a destiny, he didn't want it. As the eldest son in his family, he had a little cabin-like room that resembled a miniature junkyard. He sat cross-legged on his bed and did breathing exercises as he started to practice an entry-level genetic cultivation art. This was an ungraded low-quality cultivation art. One was supposed to adjust their breathing to stimulate the initial potential of their genes. Although his heart was filled with anger, Feng Lin gradually regained a calm state of the heart. His breath grew slower and slower, eventually lapsing into almost nothing. Only the occasional puff of air from his nostrils indicated that he was still alive. Gradually, he felt a warm current in the depths of his body. The warm current entered his meridians, his flesh and blood, each individual cell, and their nuclei, as well as his genes. At this moment, his body suddenly trembled. There was an inexplicable throbbing from the depths of his genes. A mysterious wave of unknown cooling energy suddenly surged out, instantly expanding, gradually submerging him. His eyes suddenly blurred. In the darkness of the void, a transparent human silhouette could be seen there. Countless pinpoints of light flickered unceasingly, like the countless stars in the skies, brimming with their own radiance. The features of that shiny silhouette were actually identical to him. At this moment, a surge of information mysteriously appeared in his mind. Name, Feng Lin. Vitality, 0.4. Monkey gene, 2. Stone birth gene, 1. Genetic potential, 1468%. Chapter 4, Genetic Equation. This is. Feng Lin narrowed his eyes as he looked at the strange thing before him. He was extremely shocked. In the desolate and empty void, a transparent silhouette could be seen immersed in starlight. This transparent and shiny silhouette actually looked identical to him. On the chest of the shiny silhouette, 2 conspicuous balls of golden light could be seen. They resembled the blazing sun and were extremely dazzling. These 2 balls of golden light were surrounded by dots of dim silvery light. They looked as scattered and as numerous as stars in the sky. These dots of light flickered between brightness and dimness, and looking at the silhouette in its entirety was like looking at a figure. A figure that resembled the starry skies. At the head of that figure, a row of numbers could be seen. Vitality, 0.4. What was that ball of golden light? Feng Lin willed his intention there, and 2 rows of information appeared in his mind. Monkey gene, 2. Stone birth gene, 1. Could all these be genetic points? Were they some kind of energy that was transformed by one's physical data? Many thoughts flashed through Feng Lin's mind. But when he cross-referenced it to his own situation, he was certain that he was right. To awaken the potential of one's genes, the cultivation of genetic points was required. There were 3 aspects to it: awakening, strengthening, and evolving. Gene awakening was the stage in which genes changed from recessive state to a dominant state. When the gene awakened, it controlled the life elements of the human body and produced new organs and abilities. Originally, the human body couldn't control extraordinary abilities. But once someone awakened the flame gene, they would be able to control the power of fire. If they awakened the ice gene, they would be able to control the flow of water and condense it into ice. However, the process wasn't just a single step but rather a course of events that slowly progressed on and transformed. This was what gene awakening meant. After a gene was completely awakened, it would mean that one's body had adapted to its own transcending mythological gene. Next, one had to use a certain method of cultivation to undergo the gene strengthening process, to stimulate the gene's greatest potential. The number of times in which different genes could be strengthened was also different. The higher the tier, the more the number of times it could be strengthened. The 2 golden balls of light clearly represented the 2 current mythological genes that Feng Lin had awakened. One of them, the monkey gene, had already been strengthened twice, while the stone birth gene had only been strengthened once. After gene strengthening was completed, gene evolution would begin. And gene evolution was the process of synthesizing 2 different, albeit same-tier genes together, evolving them into a higher-tier mythological gene set. Once evolution was completed, the cultivator would be able to reach a higher realm. In that case, what did those dots of dim silvery light mean? Feng Lin sent a probe of his will over, and a burst of information instantly appeared in his mind. Muscle gene, 0. Turtle breath gene, 0. Tiger Fang gene, 0. So it turned out that these dim dots of silver light were recessive genes in his body that had not been awakened. Feng Lin finally understood in his heart. So this transparent and shiny silhouette was a genetic map of his body. Given the vast numbers of genes a human had, they were truly like stars in the sky. No matter how strong science had developed to, it was impossible for science to detect everything accurately. But now, all this information was clearly displayed before Feng Lin's eyes. This scene caused him to think of a national-level treasure back in ancient China, the illustrated manual of acupuncture points of the bronze figure. That simply showed all the position of acupuncture points and meridians, but what Feng Lin was seeing was the entire genetic map for his body. Genes were as numerous as the stars, maybe there were over billions of them. Feng Lin felt a headache coming when he looked carefully at them. Although each gene was clearly visible, it was impossible for him to probe all the information about it. With the intention of his will, he shifted his attention to his dantian that was located 2 inches below his navel. A cluster of nebulae could be seen swirling in there. There were roughly about 14 of them. Does this mean that I have 14 free genetic points to spend as I like? The cluster of nebulae was glowing brightly, resembling a mixture of cloud and mist, and was flowing continuously as its form changed. There were also wisps of star fog floating at the side, currently converging together. They were in the midst of forming a star cluster. The cluster of nebulae he saw earlier joined together with the star fog, resembling large sheets that extended forever into the distance. Altogether, they propped up this entire stretch of starry skies that represented the transparent figure before his eyes. Genetic potential, 1,468%. Feng Lin inexplicably understood the meaning when he saw this. Most likely, the transparent figure could transform the genes in his body into data. And Feng Lin's current data was: Name, Feng Lin. Vitality, 0.4. Monkey gene, 2. Stone birth gene, 1. Genetic potential, 1,468%. There were no stats like strength, speed, and constitution. All of those were rubbish. The only data available were his vitality stats and his awakened genes. The reason for this was because genes were the origins of life, and vitality was the comprehensive embodiment of life's strength, speed, and constitution. They were simply different aspects that made up vitality. As one's vitality increased, these other aspects would similarly be increased in accordance as well. However, the genetic map wasn't merely this. Under the repeated probing of his will, a wonderful feel of control over the genetic points surged in Feng Lin's heart. It seemed like his will had a mysterious connection to these genetic points. It felt as though he could control them. Let's try it. With his will, he linked 3 irrelevant genes together. Inside his dantian, a ball of star fog from his nebulae's cluster split off and was infused into the 3 random genes he linked. Genetic potential, -15%. The 3 silvery points of light expanded and contracted, linking together as miraculous changes occurred. Continuous different combinations appeared, each showing a different sequence. Ding ding ding. 5 chimes rang out. The 3 random genes were finally linked, but the starlight radiating from them continued flowing forth in lines towards the depths of the starry skies inside the transparent figure, reaching out to 5 previously unknown silvery points as they formed the shape of a genetic tree. Airflow gene X2 plus cloud mist gene X3 plus moisture gene X1 equals frost gene. Airflow gene X3 plus cloud mist gene X4 plus moisture gene X4 equals rain gene. Airflow gene X4 plus cloud mist gene X2 plus moisture gene X1 equals hurricane gene. Airflow gene X2 plus cloud mist gene X5 plus moisture gene X4 equals thunder gene. Airflow gene X6 plus cloud mist gene X7 plus moisture gene X5 equals storm gene. A total of 5 formulas. Feng Lin was completely stunned. He actually learned a total of 5 genetic formulas all of a sudden. There were different tiers for genes, and they could be classified into Tier 0, Tier 1, Tier 2. 0 was the starting point for numbers. Hence, all Tier 0 genes were known as basic genes. 1 was the basic element of all numbers. All numbers were derived from 1 and hence, Tier 1 genes were known as primeval genes. Different tiered genes had different abilities. They could complement each other and evolve into higher tiered genes. Tier 0 genes could be synthesized into Tier 1 genes. Tier 1 genes could be synthesized into Tier 2 genes, and so on and forth. These were known as a genetic formula. When genetic formulas of similarly tiered genes were grouped together, at the end of the process, a genetic tree diagram would be formed. Because it also looked like a pyramid, some cultivators also termed it as a genetic pyramid. Genetic cultivation arts equals genetic tree plus genetic formulas plus gene development. A genetic tree showed the evolution path for genes and would point to the overall direction of future cultivation. The genetic formula was a method for synthesizing low-tiered genes to turn them into higher-tiered ones. And as for gene development, it referred to the subtle methods one used to train and stimulate the potential of each and every gene. From top to bottom, from a macro view to a micro view, one had to involve all these aspects. Only then would the content be complete enough to name it as a genetic cultivation art. The wind blew and rain fell, water vapor could turn into frost when the temperature was cold enough, and when all the correct factors converged together, even a thunderstorm could occur. The airflow gene, cloud mist gene, and moisture gene were 3 Tier 0 genes that could control the weather. When synthesized together, they could become either the frost gene or rain gene, both Tier 1 genes. This was already an open secret to the humans of the interstellar era. However, Feng Lin didn't expect that under the simulation of his genetic points, if the strengthening tally of the 3 Tier 0 genes was different, 3 brand new set of genetic formulas would actually appear. Wind could become a hurricane, rain clouds could produce thunder, and when the airflow was fierce enough, a storm would appear when all 3 Tier 0 genes of varying strengths were mixed together. Who could have imagined that these 3 most common Tier 0 genes could be synthesized into the powerful hurricane gene, thunder gene, and storm gene? These 3 genetic formulas might seem incredible, but they all followed the laws of nature and it was impossible for them to be false. Oh my God! I wonder how much would these 3 genetic formulas be worth if I sold them? Feng Lin started panting. It wasn't that he wasn't calm. It was just that these formulas were simply too valuable. A genetic formula was a critical component of a genetic cultivation art. The appearance of new genetic formulas basically meant that the embryonic forms of new genetic cultivation arts had appeared. Knowledge was priceless. And as for knowledge about cultivation, they were more priceless than priceless. Although these were 3 basic formulas, Feng Lin was very clear that if he sold them, he would instantly be able to get a huge amount of star coins. Each genetic formula was worth at least 1,000,000 star coins. Added together, if he sold them, his proceeds would be sufficient for his family to buy a luxurious home on the market, and they could move into a more comfortable environment. However, unless it was the last resort, Feng Lin wouldn't do so. Selling genetic formulas was too conspicuous. After all, only those genomic masters at the very peak could create new genetic formulas. Right now, Feng Lin wasn't even a cultivator. He simply didn't have enough strength to protect his own secrets and might even bring trouble onto himself and be devoured by others. Feng Lin didn't stop. He continued to experiment swiftly. The dim silver points of light were linked together under the control of his will as more and more formulas appeared. Flame gene X7 plus rock gene X3 equals magma gene. Muscle gene X5 plus hormone gene X1 plus protein gene X3 equals bodybuilding gene. Fish skin gene X3 plus respiratory gene X5 plus diving gene X3 equals amphibious gene. More and more formulas were derived, and he began to push the boundaries, attempting a reversal. He already gained the knowledge for a few high-tiered genes and was now attempting to break them down. Divine movement gene equals muscle gene X2 plus speed gene X6 plus airflow gene X3. Fiery eyes gene equals flame gene X3 plus vision gene X5. Giant gene equals bone gene X3 plus muscle gene X3 plus growth gene X5 plus hormone gene X3. Brand new formulas were deduced, and his genetic potential was rapidly being exhausted. Very swiftly another 30% was deducted. Feng Lin gradually understood how great the effect of this ability of his was. This might be because of a mutation of his soul when he crossed over worlds. The effect was simply beyond imagination and was similar to mathematical equations. Yes, these were genetic equations. Similar to mathematical equations, the solution could also be deduced. Genes became the variable in genetic equations. A higher-tiered gene set could be generated from exhausting one's potential to deduce the end result, or one could simply reverse engineer the process and break down the components of a high-tiered gene to see which low-tiered genes were synthesized to form it. Genetic equations. This was precisely my ability. Feng Lin silently mused. To him, the ability to obtain genetic equations was not just limited to this. If others obtained his ability, they might only be able to deduce genetic equations. However, things were different from him. Every legend was a path leading to godhood. Through ancient myths and legends, he would know of his future direction in cultivation, but the step-by-step process would still have to be grasped by him repeatedly and gradually. Feng Lin had the required knowledge. Based on his understanding of the ancient myths and legends, as well as his ability to deduce different genetic equations, he might really eventually be able to extrapolate the cultivation path of a god or divine being in the past. This was the greatest effect that the ability to create genetic equations had on him. If he could really reach that step, one could very well imagine what it entailed. Maybe he could become a god? Naturally, the prerequisite was that he had to have enough genetic potential. Genetic equations, although powerful, they were not to be used so lightly. One had to exhaust their body's genetic potential in order to utilize it. According to the rate of genetic potential consumption, he estimated that he would run out of genetic potential once he activated his abilities after 100 or so more times. However, where did genetic potential originate from? Feng Lin temporarily still had no idea. Oh. At this moment, Feng Lin's eyes suddenly brightened as he thought of a point which he previously neglected. Since this is the case, why don't I extrapolate what my future path should be? Everyone said that there were no genetic formulas that could synthesize the monkey gene and stonebirth gene into a higher-tiered gene. Therefore, he was always considered as trash that had no way of advancing. However, now that he had acquired this ability to deduce new genetic formulas, there might really be a way to synthesize the monkey gene and stonebirth gene together. It was worth a try. Feng Lin's heart was pounding. If he succeeded, his future path of advancement that was deemed a failure would be limitless. Ancient poems mentioned, clouds will obscure one's vision and there's nowhere to go when the land is fully explored. However, there's always a glimmer of hope at one's darkest hour. Wasn't this precisely his situation? Under the huge computation power of his ability, even a crippled path could lead to a grand path connecting to heavens. His heart told him loud and clear. Just do it if you want to do it. Feng Lin was clear that this was his only chance. He controlled his will and started to link the two genes together. Genetic potential minus 10%, minus 10%, dash 10%. Very swiftly, another 60% from his remaining genetic potential was consumed. However, this new genetic equation was being extrapolated at an extremely slow rate. The monkey gene and stonebirth gene continuously combined, yet they seemed inharmonious, like water and fire. There seemed to be no way for them to be fused together at all. Could it be that it's truly impossible for me to walk on the path of cultivation? Feng Lin felt anxiety shaking his heart. It wasn't easy for him to come to this magnificent world. If his path had already ended before it even began, how could he be willing to accept it? No, he would never give up. Feng Lin was staking it all. He continued to pour his genetic potential into the two genes, trying to stimulate them. Finally, after a total of 360% was consumed from his genetic potential, four nebulae in his dantian disintegrated. Furthermore, a unique and brand new genetic formula appeared before his eyes. Feng Lin stared at it in surprise, but his expression soon turned bizarre, followed by shock, immense joy, and bewilderment. Monkey gene X10 plus stone birth gene X10 equals stone monkey gene? Chapter 5, Strengthening and Increasing Points. Stone monkey gene. To think that it was the stone monkey gene. To Feng Lin, this wasn't a pleasant surprise, but a great shock. The genetic equation depleted a large amount of genetic potential only to derive with this one formula. This meant that the stone monkey gene was the only evolutionary gene from the monkey gene and stone birth gene. Stone monkey gene. The stone monkey has no parents and is brought up by the heavens and earth. It has a body of stone and bones that were as tough as steel. It also has extraordinary strength. With the new stone monkey gene lit up, information about it also started to appear. Feng Lin got to know about this stone monkey gene's abilities. After the stone monkey gene had been awakened, not only would the cultivator possess an ape's agility and strength, but he or she would also have an indestructible body that was tough as steel, reaching a level where one would be impervious to weapons. The stone monkey gene caused a lot of thoughts to run through his mind. In the myths and legends of ancient Huaxia on Earth in the past, that monkey was very well known. All people of Huaxia knew of its name. Flowerfruit Mountain's great sage equal to heavens, Sun Wukong. It was a stone monkey that was nurtured by heavens and earth. However, its actual identity was spiritual stone monkey. Although there was the additional spiritual word, a stone monkey was still a stone monkey. With Feng Lin's understanding of myths and legends, it was very likely that the spiritual stone monkey gene might be the future direction of the stone monkey gene's evolution. He could use this as a foundation to slowly probe the direction he should be working toward. From the stone monkey gene to the spiritual stone monkey gene, then to the monkey king gene, and so forth. Every single legend was a path to godhood. Myths and legends contained the path to godhood for each and every mythical or legendary character. Deciphering them and then allowing them to evolve was the essence of the genetic cultivation arts. Could it be that the path I have to take is that of the great sage equal to heavens, Sun Wukong's? Then, wouldn't I become a monkey? Feng Lin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What proper person would think of becoming a monkey? However, for the sake of cultivation, he was going to go all out. To gain strength, Feng Lin wasn't going to be tied down by morals. That monkey was an unrivaled existence in Huaxia's myths and legends. If he could really take this path, it would definitely be a path with unlimited possibilities and brilliant future prospects. As long as he knew the direction he was progressing toward, in addition to the existence of the genetic equation, everything was filled with possibilities. Feng Lin was firmly believed in this, and when he calmed down, he noticed that something wasn't quite right. To think that the stone monkey gene synthetic formula required both the monkey gene and the stone birth gene to be raised into 10 points. This was impossible. At this moment, there was only this thought in Feng Lin's mind. Although genes were powerful, there was a limit as to how much they could be strengthened. Genes of the same tier were further classified into different grades, namely low grade, mid grade, high grade, variation grade, and perfect grade. The worse the grade of the genes, the harder it would be to strengthen them. As for the monkey gene, which was the most inferior low-grade gene, no one had heard of it being strengthened to anything that was higher than 3 points. No one had been able to do the same for the stone-birth gene, another low-grade gene, either. Based on common sense, it was only possible to strengthen a gene to 10 points or higher if they were superior variation grade genes. However, this genetic formula required one to strengthen both the monkey gene and stone-birth gene, which were both ordinary genes, to 10 points. This was something that was impossible to achieve. If this genetic formula was real, it could be because of this requirement that no one had been able to discover this path. Feng Lin solemnly thought about it. Over countless years, despite there being so many geniuses, no one had been able to attain this. Feng Lin knew his own limitations. He was merely an apprentice and wasn't even considered an official cultivator. Therefore, it was even harder for him to meet this requirement. Since this impossible genetic formula was derived from the genetic equation, then he might have to find the answer to it from the genetic equation. After all, the existence of the genetic equation was to break the common sense to begin with. He kept on experimenting and discovered that he seemed to be controlling the 2 balls of golden light. With a single thought, his genetic potential started throbbing and the nebulae were seething. It was as if they were going to enter one of the golden balls of light at the next moment. Could it be that these genetic potential weren't only able to derive genetic formula, but also strengthen and raise the points of his genes? With a single thought, those genetic potential flowed out from the human-shaped dantian. As if blood had flowed into the heart, one of the golden ball of light kept on swelling up non-stop, as if it had eaten something extremely nourishing. Feng Lin felt a lot of emotions toward the changes that were happening to his body. His genes had clearly gone through an intense change. Name, Feng Lin. Vitality, 0.5. Monkey gene, 3. Stone-birth gene, 1. Genetic potential, 1008%. Unknowingly, his genes' strengthening tally had changed from 2 to 3. Everything had happened so naturally in just an instant as if it was a matter of course. This was marvelous. Feng Lin was full of emotions. With just a single thought, his genes had been strengthened by 1 point. There was clearly no reason to it at all. It was an extremely domineering strengthening. After the gene had been strengthened, Feng Lin had noticed that his vitality had increased from 0.4 to 0.5. Genes were the source of vitality, and the strengthening of one's genes would result in one's vitality increasing as well. However, at the same time, his genetic potential had changed from 1108% to 1008%. There was a decrease of 100%. Feng Lin gave it some thought and then understood the crux here. Other than depleting genetic potential to derive genetic formulas, each 100% of one's genetic potential could be used to refine some genetic points of choice that could be added to the genes. This was like one of those skill trees in the games, with each nebula being one genetic point, and the points would be added to the necessary areas. He needed to add more of them. After ascertaining the evolutionary path to his genes, Feng Lin wouldn't feel pain in using his genetic potential anymore. He must first strengthen the 2 basic genes and then get them to evolve into the stone monkey gene. This would allow him to take the first step to become a cultivator. As for those genetic formulas, although they were very valuable, they were useless to him for now. Therefore, there wasn't a need for him to waste his precious genetic potential on those. He was too weak now. In this interstellar era where competition was intense, he had nothing to back him up for his survival, and he would still need to take care of his family. The thing he needed the most right now was power. Once he evolved into the stone monkey gene, he would be able to officially become a cultivator, toss away the shackles on him, and obtain more freedom. Although genetic potential was very precious, and he was unable to understand where its source was from at the moment, getting stronger was what mattered the most. he would be able to find ways to obtain more genetic potential in the future. Feng Lin immediately put his thoughts into action, continuously adding points to his genes. The first one he strengthened was the monkey gene. Based on scientists' inferences, the ancestors of Earth's humans had been evolving from monkeys. Thereafter, they obtained intelligence from evolution and separated themselves from animals, taking on different paths from chimpanzees and gorillas. Apes and monkeys possessed a similar body structure with human, but their strength and agility were both above that of a human. Strengthening this gene would allow Feng Lin's physical attributes to be raised in all areas. With a single thought, his genetic potential immediately decreased by 100%. A nebula was channeled into the monkey gene. The strengthening tally instantly changed from 3 to 4, and his vitality increased by 0.1 once again. Feng Lin didn't stop and continued to add on. The monkey gene flashed without stopping, instantly increasing to 4 points, breaking the theoretical limits of genes. Everything appeared to progress so smoothly. Chapter 6: Break the Limit. The process of achieving a breakthrough in genes was very simple, so simple that Feng Lin almost didn't dare to believe it. He initially thought a large commotion would occur, but he didn't expect the breakthrough to come so easily. The tyranny of this strengthening method was simply too godlike, refreshing his perspective on it. His monkey gene had broken through to 4 points. His vitality had also reached 0.7. He had a total of 11 genetic points now, and spent 7 on the monkey gene, while 4 on the stillbirth gene. These two basic genes had respectively broken through their own limits. Feng Lin felt countless energy coursing through his entire body. It was like each and every of his cell was breathing, radiating with powerful vitality. He clenched his fist and sensed the warm currents of energy flowing into the depths of his body. The feeling was akin to soaking inside a hot spring. At the same time, his spinal bone felt extremely itchy, like there were ants crawling inside it. Feng Lin knew that this was a process of his genes changing his body after being strengthened. The ape gene could strengthen the human body's muscle, while the birth and the stillbirth gene could also indicate the embryo. Once it was strengthened, it would keep producing embryonic stem cells to increase the strength of the human's body, causing one's body to be as tough as stone so one wouldn't be easily injured. These were what mythological genes were. One could understand the principle behind it using scientific explanation, but it was also incredibly magical. Name: Feng Lin. Vitality: 1.5. Monkey gene: 9. Stillbirth gene: 5. Genetic potential: 8%. He continued to strengthen his genes, and his vitality rose to 1.5, breaking through the barrier of 1. This was a critical point. After one's vitality broke through 1, it meant that that person would have already exceeded the average point for humans in the interstellar era. With his vitality now, he would no longer be the last-ranking student in his class. What was regretful was the fact that his genetic potential was almost completely exhausted, only a pathetic 8% was left. Before he discovered any new methods of gaining more genetic potential, it would be tough if he wished to continue strengthening his genes in the future. However, Feng Lin had already obtained what he wanted to. This was enough. It was his fortune to gain it, but it would be his fate if he lost it. He was a person who had seen 2 different worlds. Right now, Feng Lin's state of heart was extremely carefree, taking things as they came, as calm as he could be. Facing the mirror, he didn't look any different on the surface, but his body's internal structure felt completely different. Through his skin, he could faintly sense the luster glistening underneath. There seemed to be a crystalline layer inside. It felt tough and abnormal. Reaching out, he pressed his skin. He only felt a layer of steel-like bones under the surface of his skin that was seemingly unbreakable. Although his body obtained such a large breakthrough, Feng Lin was still as low profile as ever in the following days. He would follow through all his activities and go to school alone. Originally, he was considered as someone that was marginalized in school. He had had no strength, no talent, and no background. Who would want to pay any attention to him? However, such a huge transformation occurred in the span of a single night. It would be tough for him to explain, even if he wanted to. Hence, Feng Lin kept a low profile, as low-key as he possibly could. He didn't even tell his parents about this and practiced even more assiduously on the genetic breathing method during these 3 days. After finding his future path, he felt an incomparably surge of motivation to cultivate. It felt like he had almost gone mad. He would soon be sent to the clan's factory for an apprenticeship after 1 month. In order to obtain the rights to cultivate, he had to have enough capital to negotiate with his clan. After ending a day filled with tough cultivation, Feng Lin's back was completely soaked by his perspiration. His body was forced to its limit, and he felt intense pain everywhere. However, after sensing the internal system of his body, there seemed to be no changes to his genes. Chapter 6: Break the Limit. The process of achieving a breakthrough in genes was very simple, so simple that Feng Lin almost didn't dare to believe it. He initially thought a large commotion would occur, but he didn't expect the breakthrough to come so easily. The tyranny of this strengthening method was simply too godlike, refreshing his perspective on it. His monkey gene had broken through to 4 points. His vitality had also reached 0.7. He had a total of 11 genetic points now, and spent 7 on the monkey gene, while 4 on the stonebirth gene. These 2 basic genes had respectively broken through their own limits. Feng Lin felt countless energy coursing through his entire body. It was like each and every of his cell was breathing, radiating with powerful vitality. He clenched his fist and sensed the warm currents of energy flowing into the depths of his body. The feeling was akin to soaking inside a hot spring. At the same time, his spinal bone felt extremely itchy, like there were ants crawling inside it. Feng Lin knew that this was a process of his genes changing his body after being strengthened. The ape gene could strengthen the human body's muscle, while the birth and the stonebirth gene could also indicate the embryo. Once it was strengthened, it would keep producing embryonic stem cells to increase the strength of the human's body, causing one's body to be as tough as stone so one wouldn't be easily injured. These were what mythological genes were. One could understand the principle behind it using scientific explanation, but it was also incredibly magical. Name: Feng Lin. Vitality: 1.5. Monkey gene: 9. Stonebirth gene: 5. Genetic potential: 8%. He continued to strengthen his genes, and his vitality rose to 1.5, breaking through the barrier of 1. This was a critical point. After one's vitality broke through 1, it meant that that person would have already exceeded the average point for humans in the interstellar era. With his vitality now, he would no longer be the last-ranking student in his class. What was regretful was the fact that his genetic potential was almost completely exhausted, only a pathetic 8% was left. Before he discovered any new methods of gaining more genetic potential, it would be tough if he wished to continue strengthening his genes in the future. However, Feng Lin had already obtained what he wanted to. This was enough. It was his fortune to gain it, but it would be his fate if he lost it. He was a person who had seen 2 different worlds. Right now, Feng Lin's state of heart was extremely carefree, taking things as they came, as calm as he could be. Facing the mirror, he didn't look any different on the surface, but his body's internal structure felt completely different. Through his skin, he could faintly sense the luster glistening underneath. There seemed to be a crystalline layer inside. It felt tough and abnormal. Reaching out, he pressed his skin. He only felt a layer of steel-like bones under the surface of his skin that was seemingly unbreakable. Although his body obtained such a large breakthrough, Feng Lin was still as low profile as ever in the following days. He would follow through all his activities and go to school alone. Originally, he was considered as someone that was marginalized in school. He had had no strength, no talent, and no background. Who would want to pay any attention to him? However, such a huge transformation occurred in the span of a single night. It would be tough for him to explain, even if he wanted to. Hence, Feng Lin kept a low profile, as low-key as he possibly could. He didn't even tell his parents about this and practiced even more assiduously on the genetic breathing method during these 3 days. After finding his future path, he felt an incomparable surge of motivation to cultivate. It felt like he had almost gone mad. He would soon be sent to the clan's factory for an apprenticeship after 1 month. In order to obtain the rights to cultivate, he had to have enough capital to negotiate with his clan. After ending a day filled with tough cultivation, Feng Lin's back was completely soaked by his perspiration. His body was forced to its limit, and he felt intense pain everywhere. However, after sensing the internal system of his body, there seemed to be no changes to his genes. It seemed like he had truly reached a limit. Feng Lin sighed. It was tough to advance even a single step if he didn't have enough genetic points to spend as he liked. He suddenly sensed something strange. For some reason, his current genetic potential was at 18%. It actually went up by 10%? His genetic potential actually increased? What happened in this period of time? Could it be? A light flashed through his mind, and Feng Lin suddenly understood. There was nothing complicated. Genetic potential could simply be increased through cultivation. As long as he cultivated ceaselessly every day, his genetic potential would increase more and more. Although the effect was quite minuscule, he could still gain more genetic potential if he persevered and accumulated it over a long period of time. So the answer was like this. Feng Lin felt incomparably joyful. This method was much more straightforward compared to his earlier guess that the genetic equation had to absorb a kind of special energy in order to form genetic potential. This method could be likened to an old saying, "The more you sow, the more you will reap." This was an undeniable logic that wouldn't change, an eternal truth of the universe. If one were to grow stronger by absorbing external sources of energy, that would be akin to reaping without sowing. Cultivation might be arduous, but every point of improvement gained belonged to oneself. Nobody could take that away. After understanding this point, Feng Lin worked even harder in his cultivation as though he was a crazed demon. This scene naturally was seen by his parents, and both of them shook their heads and sighed helplessly. Our son hasn't given up yet. He still wants to take the college exam and become a cultivator. But how can things be so easy? His vitality stat is only at 0.4, he might not even have the qualifications to take the college exam. Let's hope he doesn't cripple his body from training too much. If this is the case, he wouldn't even be able to work at the clan's factory and would truly become a complete cripple. His parents discussed in low voices, their faces even grimmer and more bitter-looking by the time. Feng Lin heard everything, but he didn't express his stance. He only chose to work even harder in his cultivation. One had to cultivate if they sought to change their destiny. The greatest ability of the genetic equation was to transform the human body into complete data. Also, Feng Lin could see and manage everything personally. One would only get payback if they worked hard enough. This was the simplest and greatest happiness to an aspiring cultivator. How many people pursued this in vain, getting nothing in return? The owner of this original body must have also suffered a lot and also worked extremely hard. This was the only reason why he could leave behind 14 free genetic points for Feng Lin. Sadly, he didn't have the absurd ability which Feng Lin had after he crossed over. With nobody providing guidance, The original owner of Feng Lin's body also didn't understand how to strengthen his genes. He was bumbling around blindly during cultivation and didn't know his future direction. Although he had plenty of genetic potentials, he only managed to strengthen the monkey gene to 2 and stonebirth gene to 1. His vitality was also at a pathetic 0.4. His ability, genetic equation, allowed Feng Lin to see boundless possibilities, allowing him to walk on a path different from the original owner of his body. He had to cherish it. Genetic potential plus 10%. Genetic potential plus 12%. Genetic potential plus 9%. With his daily cultivation, his genetic potential continued to accumulate and would increase by 10% on average every day. If this continued on, Feng Lin estimated that he would be able to have a new genetic point very soon. He was already at the senior third year. As the days passed, the atmosphere of his school also grew increasingly heavier. The students were all extremely tense. The school library was also packed full of people who spent day and night cultivating in there. It was very rare to see anyone being relaxed. News soon circulated around, so it turned out that the college examination that only occurred once a year was about to begin. However, a mock test would be held before that, and one had to pass the mock simulation test before they could gain the qualifications to participate in the college examination. Chapter 7, College Pre-Qualifier Exam. The annual college exam is near. This is the opportunity for every single interstellar citizen to change their destiny. Everyone is entitled a single chance, and only once in their entire lifetime. The result from this exam will determine if you're a dragon or a maggot. Your destiny will be turned on its head from that moment on. Some will soar to the skies and remain superior, while others grind into dust and live a life as a nobody. A capable, middle-aged woman clothed in black attire lectured from the rostrum of the classroom. A group of students sat below, afraid to even breathe heavily. Feng Lin listened quietly. Despite the progress of humans into the interstellar era where advanced technology allowed them to travel through a wormhole across millions of light years, the methods of such old-fashioned college exams prevailed. Not only had they preserved it completely, but they also elevated it to a whole new level. The breadth of the examination was broad beyond imagination, extending across the entire human population of interstellar era. As an effective means of breaking through the walls of innate social classes, there was a purpose behind the existence of the college exams. The college pre-qualifier exam is the first school-wide mock exam. Only those who pass this will earn the chance to participate in the college exam. If you can't even pass the mock exam, then don't even think about participating in the college exam and put yourself to shame. You'd even lower our school's graduation rate, the female head teacher announced sternly, her eyes sweeping across the room before lingering on Feng Lin and a few other last-ranking students. Her warning was conveyed without a word. The annual college exam for all interstellar citizens was nothing to scoff about. Billions of people would cross this plank, and if you didn't get exceptional results, then you will be sending yourself to your own death. The school would never allow those good-for-nothing dregs to pull their precious college exam ranking down. If they failed, they would taint the school's reputation. The other students basked in their misfortune at that scene. Feng Lin clenched both his fists before loosening them slowly. If it had been the past, he might have been filled with resentment. Now, though, he was calm. For a person who had been through death and back, fragile hearts were a thing of the past. More importantly, he was confident. With a vitality of 1.5, he had long since surpassed most of his peers. Why should he torment himself with vengeance? The improvements to his abilities had allowed him to mature much as well. All these fighting and scheming against each other were nothing more than childish behaviors to him. These people would be in for a surprise if they still thought that he was the same old Feng Lin. To achieve good results on the college exam, the top 3 students from each class for the college pre-qualifier exam will have the chance to enter and train at the illusory Martial Pagoda for free. The head teacher stunned them with a piece of groundbreaking news. The whole class burst into life. The illusory Martial Pagoda. The one with combat masters of the illusory Martial Pagoda? The school has really given an arm and a leg this time. No one was able to mask their excitement, as eagerness filled their every expression. The illusory Martial Pagoda was the only illusionary martial system at Earth High School. It consolidated countless battle techniques from various combat masters and projected them as a simulation through optical computing, using energy to build an illusionary space. From the outside, it was a tower about 30 levels in height. Every floor had an illusionary combat master. They were realistic, with almost the same level of competency. With each level up, the standard of the combat master would increase, and the level of difficulty intensified in proportion to the levels. Through battling with illusionary combat masters, it could increase one's battle experience and through it, allowed them to have a better grasp and understanding of their genetic abilities at a rapid rate. However, a huge amount of energy was required to activate the system. Each activation would require tens of thousands of star coins. This was an impossible feat under normal circumstances. Typically, students would have to pay with their own money in order to train in there. For every session, they would have to pay 10,000 star coins. Only those born with a silver spoon in their mouth would be able to afford it. The prospect of entering the illusory Martial Pagoda was something most students could only wish of in their wildest dreams. They hadn't expected the school to put in this much effort this time around, so much so that they were allowing 3 slots from each class for the free entry. It was no surprise that they all grew excited. Anyone who was competent was determined to get into the top 3 rankings. The literature exam will start now. At the head teacher's announcement, the examination officially commenced. This was different from Earth era. College exam in interstellar era was categorized into 2, martial exam and literature exam. Literature exam tested on theoretical knowledge, literature, history, mathematics, physics, biology, chemistry, psychology, law, and astronomy. Furthermore, the format of literature exam was also different from the college exam in Earth era. There wasn't anything like full marks, only high score, higher scores, and even higher scores. Theoretically, there was no cap on how high you could go. Due to the increase in lifespan and intelligence, they were sharper than the humans of Earth era, therefore, the difficulty of their literature exam was also greater. Yet, there was no limit to the number of exam questions. Through smart optical computing, it could churn out a set of test questions on the go. Everyone would have to answer the questions within the designated 2-hour time frame. Each question was a mark, and the more they answered, the higher scores they would get. It was precisely because there wasn't a limit on scores that the disparity between exceptional and poor students was so evident after an exam. A difference of more than 10 times was a common sight. As for the martial exams, they tested on one's cultivation. It was an exam based on mythological genes. College pre-qualifier exam was the first mock exam before college exam and the most important one. It concerned every single person's eligibility in qualifying for the college exam, and for that very reason, nobody dared to be careless about it. Literature exam was the first round. A holographic projection suspended in the space in front of every person as the contents of the exam cascaded like a waterfall, appearing before their eyes. A vitality of 1.5 wasn't just words. Not only would the quality of the body increase in all aspects, but their memory and line of thought would also improve by leaps and bounds too. Their thinking process was akin to the speed of light. They would gain epiphany about the knowledge which had baffled them before. Likewise, answers to these grueling questions would come to mind at just one glance. Was this the breakthrough from a person's change in vitality? Feng Lin kept his glee to himself, but his hands never stopped moving. People in the interstellar era were extremely advanced in their intellect, far beyond imagination. The knowledge they acquired was also exceptionally complex. General relativity, quantum mechanics, chaos theory. These were complex yet familiar theories back in the ancient Earth era. Now, they were general knowledge which every high school student was expected to know, and they weren't even the hardest topics in the exam. The toughest topic in literature exam was mythological knowledge theory. After tens of thousands of years of advancement, majority of mythological knowledge from ancient Earth was lost. Now, humans could only get a glimpse of its remnants from tattered ancient texts. Humans could only count on themselves to fill the gap by scavenging and restoring. Various theories and schools of thought were often contradictory, making one's head spin. For that reason, among the subjects in high school, mythological knowledge was the worst cause of their headaches. All the students at the scene knitted their brows as their expression turned sour. All but Feng Lin, who seemed unperturbed and relaxed. For someone from the past, these were just general knowledge. It was fortunate that the original owner of his body was extremely hardworking. Despite his low vitality, his knowledge and understanding of theoretical knowledge were great. Feng Lin inherited the original owner's memories and gained a huge advantage from that. His basic theory was not shabby at all. A great deal of knowledge about the subjects came rushing to him. Until the questions about mythology came, that was his forte. List the 12 Olympian gods and state their roles. This is simple. King of gods is Zeus, Queen of gods, Hera, goddess of war and wisdom, Athena, god of the sun, Apollo. Feng Lin breezed through it. What was the ultimate ending to the Nordic mythology? The world in ruins, Ragnarok, the end of all things. Feng Lin's lips pulled into a small smile, seemingly at ease. 3 divine teachers and the 4 sovereigns in Chinese mythology? This one was a little difficult. The origin of Chinese mythology was complicated. There was an onslaught of differing interpretations. Feng Lin thought back about it and answered with the most accepted version: 3 divine teachers. Lord of primordial beginning, Yuan Shi Tianzuan, Lord of the Way and its virtue, Dao Tianzuan, Lord of the numinous treasures, Lingbao Tianzuan. For sovereigns, Great Emperor of Middle Heaven North Star, Great Jade Emperor, Great Emperor of Polaris, and the Imperial God of Earth. The questions cascaded down the projection like a waterfall. Feng Lin didn't hesitate much as he answered them one after another. As he went through the questions, he grew more familiar in the technique. The knowledge lodged in his brain came surging forth, and the speed of his answers accelerated. Yet, he realized that he hadn't answered all those mythology questions right, only about 70%. Why is that? I knew that what I am aware of was the original version of the mythology. How can it be wrong? Feng Lin was puzzled before it dawned on him. He hadn't answered them wrong. To the contrary, it was the model answers which were inaccurate. The literature of ancient Earth had vanished by half. Knowledge of mythology derived only through the remnants of texts and excavation of its traces, patching them back up together step by step. It was inevitable for mistakes and contradiction in knowledge to occur due to this. The original true answers were denied by this set of knockoff mythology knowledge. Feng Lin was broody about it, but it was impossible for him to refute foolishly. How was he going to answer if they questioned him on his sources? If he claimed to have known all the knowledge surrounding ancient Earth mythology, then he would have been dragged away and sliced. This was an unwise move and something Feng Lin would not do. Even so, the exam was still ongoing. If he wanted higher scores, and his accuracy wasn't enough, then he would have to rely on quantity to make up for it. Feng Lin focused all of his attention on the exam and began answering, the movement of his fingers going faster and faster. He answered instantly with each new question. the speed of his reaction would render one speechless. The exam questions gushed down like a waterfall. This couldn't be described as answering the questions anymore. He was practically swiping through them. Feng Lin was engrossed in it, turning into a swiping maniac in delight, unable to stop. Chapter 8, The Swiping Questions Maniac. The questions on the projection gushed down like a waterfall. Data streamed across Feng Lin's eyes. His fingers flitted across the screen like butterflies weaving through flowers, swiping across questions naturally and without pause, unhurried and pleased. Others were engrossed with their own examination and hence, no one noticed the strange sight. It wasn't long before 2 hours were up, and the examination concluded. Feng Lin shut down the screen in silence. The performance he had unleashed in this exam far surpassed any of his previous. He had an idea of how many questions he answered correctly, and that scared even himself. Work hard in silence, let your success make the noise, that was the virtuous way. Feng Lin didn't proclaim his efforts intentionally. However, once the exam concluded, the class's top students in the front row roared into life. Wow! Zhao Kai, you managed to answer 250 questions. That's amazing. That's at least 2 questions per minute on average. As expected from a prodigy with a vitality of more than 2. Your intelligence received a great boost, and your line of thought is at the speed of light. You're a superhuman existence. It's truly impressive how you are able to correctly answer such difficult questions. A genius indeed. We're not a match. A burst of startled gasp rang out from the side just as the exam results were out. A huge-statured, 1.9 meters tall boy was surrounded by others. While he kept an aloof facade, he still couldn't help the satisfied smile from forming at the corner of his lips. This rascal was still too inexperienced. Feng Lin shook his head. That person, Zhao Kai, was the top of their class. It was said that he had already awoken 2 formidable genes, Flame Gene and Metal Gene. Not only that, he had strengthened it several times. As for his vitality, it was rumored that it surpassed 2, becoming the class's well-known prodigy. The reason why he could reach such a state was due to his wealthy family background. They feasted on the meat of interstellar monsters, drank top-grade gene potions, and relied entirely on the accumulation of their resources. If a true prodigy had access to such resources, they would have long been an impressive interstellar cultivator. That said, being born into a good family was also their competence. Feng Lin wouldn't reduce himself to the level of losers who felt indignant at others, who envied and grew jealous, and who was full of hate. Although his abilities didn't compare to Zhao Kai's yet, he possessed an unbelievable ability, genetic equation. Feng Lin was confident that his prospects weren't something which Zhao Kai could measure up to. He already had a spacecraft, why would he be jealous over a bicycle? We'll now announce the results. The female head teacher began as she read the list. With just a glance, her expression stiffened. It was after a long pause before she hesitantly spoke up. In first place, Feng Lin? 588 points. What? Everyone was dumbstruck. With such grueling questions, someone managed to score 588 points? Didn't this mean that he had answered at least 588 questions within 2 hours, and they would have to be all correct answers? This was more than double the number of correct answers by the class's top student, Zhao Kai. Almost triple even. How was this possible? Pair after pair of dazed eyes shifted towards Feng Lin as if they had just seen a ghost. Could it be that there's a bug with the optical computing? Maybe it showed the wrong exam results. That must be the case. Isn't he one of the last-ranking students? How could he have achieved such a good result? Forget about our class. Apart from those exceptional geniuses in the school's history, there have never been anyone else who received a score of more than 500 in a 2-hour literature exam. That's right. Even Zhao Kai couldn't get such a high score. How could it be possible that this guy did? We have to see his exam screen. The other students concurred the notion with a nod of their heads. All of them regarded this as the only logical explanation. What? A last-ranking student broke the record of exam scores through his own effort. What a joke. The head teacher thought the same way as she retrieved Feng Lin's exam screen from the optical computer for all to re-inspect. Everyone crowded around it, checking questions after the next, not allowing even the slightest mistake to slip past them. Feng Lin's eyes darkened at the sight but subsequently let out a burst of indifferent laughter. A person of integrity could stand any tests. If these people wanted to check it, then be his guest. He just hoped that their fragile hearts wouldn't shatter all over the ground. In fact, he knew that he hadn't answered just 588 questions, he had answered 698 of them in total. It was impossible to get every question right with the speed of his swiping, and he got 110 questions wrong as a result. Feng Lin shook his head. He was unsatisfied with his own performance. This question is right. This one too. They're all correct. How is this possible? Everyone in the class, their head teacher included, widened their eyes with every verified answer, until they were almost as big as a bull's eye. They checked through Feng Lin's exam papers and realized that not only were the number of questions answered beyond their imagination, but the accuracy of them was also staggering. It was above 80%. A look of disbelief swept across all their faces. They were in the interstellar era where technology was unbelievably advanced and surveillance facilities had reached the level of being able to monitor atoms. This put an end to all speculations of cheating being involved. If it had not been because of this, they would truly have started suspecting Feng Lin of cheating. Feng Lin had always been at the bottom of the class. How could he have scored above 500 points in the literature exam? The probability of this was even smaller than meeting another planet with life in this universe. 1 in a million? 1 in a billion? Yet, this was a fact and there was no other choice but to believe it. Amid the crowd, it wasn't hard to distinguish Zhao Kai's expression. He had such an ugly look on him. He had always ranked first in class. No one else ever dared to shake him off that position. Yet, a last-ranking student dared to climb over his head and surpassed him by so many points. This fact made it hard for him to accept. Naturally, he wouldn't spout something as foolish as an accusation towards Feng Lin for cheating. Rather, he spoke in a low voice to the female head teacher. "Teacher, we should review the surveillance footage during the exam. Otherwise, I'm afraid no one would believe that a last-ranking student like Feng Lin would be able to score a high score of 588. Who knows, maybe the school's optical computing system had an error, or perhaps it was being attacked by interstellar hackers." Zhao Kai wasn't explicit in his words, but there were subtle hints behind them. A single pebble could instigate thousands of ripples. As the long-standing top student of their class, his words were persuasive. The other students began to voice their agreement. "That's right. We want to view the exam records. I can't accept that a last-ranking student could score 588 points. That's impossible." Just because Feng Lin had attained the highest score in history, chaos erupted in their class. Voices of suspicion filled the air around them. There was no one who would believe that Feng Lin achieved this score through his own effort. It was just a high score. Was this even necessary? Feng Lin grew frustrated. In that instant, he felt as though it was him against the world and annoyance began to fill his heart. He got the top of class through his own abilities. Why should he be questioned in this manner? Feng Lin frowned slightly. He knew it was the drastic improvements in his result that caused the uproar. Still, in interstellar era, they had a huge population with incomparably intense competition. There was no way to stay low profile. As a student, to gain the teachers' and the school's favor, one must boast and display their abilities and talents. Only through this way could they receive the school's support in grooming them and getting the resources to be tilted towards them. This would allow a smoother path in cultivation. Simply put, the higher you scored, the stronger you were. Only when you showed potential in performing at the college exam would the school put in the effort to groom you. If not, why would the school invest their educational and cultivation resources on a normal person? This was why Feng Lin decided to do his best to get a good score. In the interstellar era, being weak was a crime and being low profile was the dumbest behavior in the world. Quiet. At the sight of the crowd's agitation, the head teacher couldn't stand it anymore. With a shout, she exhibited her imposing power over the class. Since this uproar had spread across the entire class, as the head teacher, it was her duty to calm things down at once. She sized Feng Lin up time and time again before speaking. "Feng Lin, your improvement is too drastic this time around. Don't blame the other students for overthinking it. To assure your credibility, I will have to check through everything again." "A drastic improvement is my fault then?" Feng Lin let out a huff of indignance. "Potential, one must have potential. If they had absolute potential, others would accept it wholeheartedly." Since the head teacher had made her decision, Feng Lin knew there was no use opposing against it. The thirst in his heart was stronger than ever before. Regarding Feng Lin's reaction, the head teacher neither bothered nor cared as she began checking again. Not only did she check through the exam paper, but she even retrieved the surveillance footage and monitored the electrodermal response on Feng Lin's body to check if there were any signs of cheating. Every optical computer used during a student's exam was linked to a surveillance monitoring system. Every head teacher would be able to open the footage at any time with just a touch of their finger. A projection appeared in front of their eyes. Feng Lin filled the image, answering one question after another at amazing speed, his fingers flitting through and gliding smoothly across. He didn't hesitate much for each question and answered them in haste. Physics, mathematics, astronomy, mythology. None of those subjects managed to stump him. A small smile began to form on his face, revealing the utmost confidence and knowledge he had. He answered them so quickly, almost as though he didn't need to think about it. Even the complex questions on mythology knowledge didn't seem to pose as a difficulty for him. Yeah. The thousands of strange mythology knowledge and their logic were almost always contradicting. That's the hardest to cheat, yet he answered them correctly. If this is true, then it is simply outrageous. One after another, they leaned forward and observed the surveillance footage closely. The shocking performance ignited a chorus of gasps. They weren't just shocked, they were freaked out. "Quick, look. He answers them at such a rapid speed. He isn't merely answering, he's practically swiping through them. Could he be the legendary swiping questions maniac? The existences that bury their head in studies, swiping through tens of thousands of practice questions. They already attain a level where they can learn without a teacher, understanding everything through their own effort." It was as if the crowd had discovered a new island, discovered the secret of Feng Lin's answering speed and his high accuracy. They couldn't help but size Feng Lin up like they were seeing him again for the first time. The surveillance optical computer offered no reaction from start to end. They didn't find a hair out of place with Feng Lin, not even the slightest thing out of the ordinary, and that, in itself, scared them. Could it be that Feng Lin was truly the legendary swiping questions maniac, achieving those high scores through his own effort? Chapter 9, Testing Vitality Stats. The atmosphere suddenly turned silent, growing tense and awkward. There were observing cameras set up to provide a 360-degree vision at the exam venue. There was no dead angle at all. No strange behavior was observed, and there was no bug with regards to the monitoring equipment. So what did this mean? This meant that Feng Lin had truly used his own capabilities to achieve the highest scores. This was why the atmosphere was now so awkward. Those students, who caused a big fuss earlier, all silently left as though nothing had ever happened. Nobody apologized for their earlier behavior. Zhao Kai, who was among the crowd, had a face filled with the utmost reluctance. However, the truth was before his eyes. There was irrefutable evidence. If he tried to create more trouble, he would become nothing but a joke. Ultimately, he could only grit his teeth and bear it. What the eye didn't see, the heart didn't grieve over. He wanted nothing more than for Feng Lin to move away from him as far as he could. Upon seeing the sullen faces of everyone, Feng Lin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was just merely the top score of the written exam. Was such a huge commotion necessary? The originally noisy classroom finally quietened down. Everyone went silent, preparing for the next test, the martial exam. Feng Lin also began to seriously prepare. He stretched a bit to warm up, stimulating his body to its utmost potential so as to ensure that he would get the best result in the martial exam. After an hour passed, the sounds of a robotic voice rang out in the school once more. The second exam is about to start. Each class please be prepared to participate. Everyone understood that this was the school informing them that the exam was starting. The female head teacher of their class walked up to the rostrum again and began to speak. The martial exam is about to begin. If your vitality stats has not reached 1.0, you don't need to participate to embarrass yourself. Even if you have a very high score in the literature exam, you would ultimately still score 0 for the martial exam. Her words were filled with the intention to target someone. Everyone understood she was talking about Feng Lin. Ha ha ha. The crowd started laughing uproariously. That's right, all of them started to cheer up, sweeping aside the depressing feeling they had earlier. You might have stumbled upon some dog's hit luck and obtained the top score in the literature exam, but there was no way to fake one's vitality stats. The martial exam will definitely make you show your true form. Let's see if you can still act so nonchalant later. Almost everyone had an elated look on their faces, as though wanting to see Feng Lin making a joke out of himself. Feng Lin noted down all of his classmates' expressions. A mocking smile curled up his lips. They wanted to see him making a fool out of himself? I'm sorry. I'm going to disappoint you all. The first test of the martial exam was the test of one's vitality stats. Vitality was the most basic embodiment of life. It was the state of health, strength, speed, constitution, and endurance. All of these aspects were included. It was also a very important indicator of one's genetic potential. Someone with strong vitality would definitely surpass an ordinary person in all aspects. The classroom was extremely spacious, and right now, there was a pure metallic strange-looking machine right in the center. The machine released rays of red light and continuously scanned. This machine was precisely a vitality scanner. Du Jiming. A student walked towards the machine. A ray of red light scanned him as a number appeared on the machine. Vitality, 1.36. If one wanted to participate in the college exam, their vitality had to exceed 1, or it would basically be impossible to enter any colleges. Upon seeing his vitality stats exceeding an average person by 0.36, that person excitedly walked back and even purposely cast a glance at Feng Lin. Zhao Kai. Zhao Kai was cheered on by the crowd. He stood before the scanner as the red light flashed. Vitality, 2.2. The evident number on the scanner caused a commotion in the crowd. As expected of Zhao Kai, his vitality stats are so shocking. In previous tests, he have already reached 2.0. But now, his vitality is already at 2.2. What a fast improvement speed. If he continues to develop himself, he might truly gain enough power in the future to leave the solar system and enter those interstellar colleges. One must know that in the boundless starry sky of the universe, our solar system exists in the most remote corner. A countless number of voices filled with admiration and envy rang out. Even the female head teacher, who always had a strict face, now actually had a smile on her face. Clearly, she was very satisfied with Zhao Kai's score. Zhao Kai then walked back to his seat. His gaze penetrated the crowd and stared at Feng Lin while a cold smile appeared on his face. It was like a wolf staring at its prey. Feng Lin didn't really care about it. His eyes glowed as a thought flashed through his mind. Interstellar colleges? After that, the female teacher continued reading out names, and the students went to take the vitality test one after the other. Vitality, 1.12. Vitality, 1.06. Vitality, 0.95. The majority of students had vitality stats around 1.0. Only a rare few had a vitality that exceeded the 1.4 marks like Du Shiming. So far, only Zhao Kai, a single person, had exceeded 2.0 in the vitality stat. One couldn't help but say that although this man was arrogant, he did have the qualifications to do so. As the teacher reached the end of the name list, she directly announced, "The vitality test has ended, the result is." Before she ended her sentence, a voice echoed out, "Teacher, I have not yet taken the test." Feng Lin raised his hand. The teacher was extremely unhappy with her words being interrupted. She glared at him and didn't say anything. The other students also felt extremely impatient. Your vitality stats was only at 0.4, but you still want to take the college exam? What if you got the lowest score here? Wouldn't you have thrown the school's face completely? The head teacher don't even want you to take this test. Can't you understand? You think you can pass the Marshall exam with a vitality stats only at 0.4, the teacher rudely snorted. It was tough to break one's prior impression. Even his head teacher didn't believe in him. But for the sake of obtaining the qualifications to take the college exam, it was impossible for Feng Lin to give up. That's right. Feng Lin replied neither in a servile nor overbearing manner. He then continued, "Teacher, back in Huaxia on the earth, there's an old saying. A scholar who has been away for 3 days, have to be looked at anew. It has been so long since the last mock test. How do you know I'll fail for sure? You still don't want to give up?" The female teacher frowned. But as he was a student of the school, Feng Lin's request was not an unreasonable one. She could intentionally disregard this student, but she couldn't intentionally obstruct him. No matter who she was, she didn't have the authority to stop Feng Lin from participating in the Marshall exam. It was ultimately because of her impression of Feng Lin as the last-ranking student which caused her to belittle him. The female teacher shook her head but eventually relented. She then activated the vitality scanner while signaling Feng Lin to go over. In any case, as the head teacher of a class, it would only serve to have many advantages and no disadvantages in the off chance that a new genius was discovered in her class. Fine then, I want to see how high your vitality stats are. However, they had all neglected a point. If one's vitality stats were too low, it would mean that that person's intellect wouldn't have been too advanced. In that case, it would be impossible for that person to become the top scorer in the literature exam. Feng Lin didn't bother to reply. He had argued and managed to gain the chance to prove himself. Cold gazes shot towards him from all directions, akin to thousands of sharp swords wanting to pierce him. Enduring all the mocking and sarcastic looks of his classmates, Feng Lin steeled himself and walked towards the vitality scanner. The red light flashed, scanning his body. His internal organs, cells, genes, and everything were scanned and transformed into data. What? The female teacher and students in the class were all completely stunned as they stared at the number on the vitality scanner. They even blinked their eyes, suspecting that they had seen wrongly. The number shown on the vitality scanner should be an impossibility. Vitality, 1.5. Chapter 10, Budding Talent. What, Vitality 1.5? How was that possible? Everyone who saw this data was dumbfounded. With such a high vitality, he was just behind Zhao Kai in the class. If it had been the others, it would be all right. But Feng Lin had been only a trash student of 0.4 vitality previously. It had been just 2 examinations away. What kind of world-changing transformation had happened to him? In such a short period, his vitality increased by 1.1. It was totally unbelievable and unrealistic. Despite the fraud suspicion, the truth was being displayed in front of them at the moment. A solid 1.5. Everyone had to accept it anyhow, even if they could not accept. Impossible, the scanner must be spoiled. How could this guy have such a high vitality? Du Jiming could not believe it. His vitality had been ranked the second in the class all these while. But now, a low-graded student surpassed him with a difference of 0.14. What was wrong with this world? He could only stare blankly. Don't be silly. Unless this vitality scanner is spoiled, it would never be wrong. If that is the case, how come there was no mistake in Zhao Kai's vitality? Someone analyzed rationally. Yeah. Some heaven-defying thing must have happened to Feng Lin and changed him? All kinds of comments were made regarding Feng Lin. At the same time, they could not help but admit that Feng Lin would gain a substantial development in his intellect with his high vitality now. With that, Feng Lin definitely had the ability to achieve high marks in the written exam. Although they could not accept it, there was no way they could continue being skeptical and deny reality. Reality would sometimes make people helpless, wouldn't it? Fool. Zhao Kai clenched his teeth. Before this, he was completely against this guy, yet the ending was such a tragedy. The result of vitality scan did not prove the opponent to be cheating but instead had proven him innocent. How could he accept that? Though he won in the martial exam, he had been the number 1 in class for a long time, and he would not allow anyone to surpass him, not even for one written exam. Kid, your nightmare comes next. It's your fault to choose an opponent you can never win over. He stared at Feng Lin's silhouette, his eyes appeared sinister. Could it be that this student was so lucky to have a potential explosion period before the college exam? The female head teacher could not help but make an assumption after seeing Feng Lin's stunning results. As an experienced head teacher who led several batches of graduating students, she knew about this stuff very well. When they approached the senior year, some of the previously unknown students would enter an exponential potential explosion period. Their results would improve rapidly and gain outstanding progress. That was because the students had the potential, but they were buried before this. When the pre-college exam was approaching, the enormous stress would maximize their full potential and force them to grow speedily. Could Feng Lin be one of these students? Then, she must have overlooked it previously. But this was too much. From a low-graded student, he made a leap and became the top few students in the class. The improvement was so great that she had never seen someone like this in her entire teaching career. Next, it all depended on Feng Lin's performance. Perhaps, he could show her a more reliable and thorough side of him. People reacted differently to Feng Lin's explosive change, but all of them were stunned. Yet, it was a big mistake to think that that was the end of it. Feng Lin's subsequent performance was even more unbelievable. After vitality test, the strength test and speed test came next. Speed and strength were the most basic traits of life. With the vitality index alone, it was pointless if he could not perform well in speed and strength. Even when the vitality score was the same, different life forms would have different speed and strength. It was most prominent in animals. According to scientific studies, an adult tiger and an adult elephant had similar vitality scores. In this case, elephants were much stronger than tigers in terms of strength, but much weaker in terms of speed. The same thing applied to humans. Some were born to be good in running, and some were extremely strong. Genes defined the essence of lives. Yet, each individual might have a different way to show it. Speed tester and punch force machine were placed in the class. They were used to test the speed of running and the strength of punching respectively. Students went up for the tests one after another, all in order. After getting the instructions, they sprinted abruptly on the speed tester. The speed tester resembled the treadmill. It would glide along with a person's pace and stop as it reached a distance of 100 meters. After that, the students would perform full-strength punches against the punch force machine. After 100 punches, the machine would display the average strength of each punch. 100 meters in 7.12 seconds, punch strength of 0.65 ton. That was the average data of the students' results at the moment. Next, Zhao Kai. Zhao Kai stepped forward amid the envious eyes of the students and the anticipating eyes of the head teacher. Woo woo woo! He sprinted with all his strength, his legs moved fast and left traces of shadows behind. After finishing a 100-meter run, his face did not turn red at all and he didn't even pant. Then, he unleashed his strongest punches on the punch force machine. Bang bang bang. It was as if he was making an explosion in the air. The punch force machine was shaking and nearly fell apart. 100 meters in 5.17 seconds, punch strength of 1.2 tons. A cheer of surprise was heard as soon as the result data came out. As expected of Zhao Kai. It is really monstrous to have such a physical performance. A vitality of more than 2, is it really so extreme? Yes. This is already nearing the limits of a mortal man. Zhao Kai smirked in pride and did not look at anyone else but Feng Lin. There was a sense of sneering in his smile. You wanted to fight with me, but you did not know your limits. Let's see how strong my physical ability is. Feng Lin did not bother and did not give a damn about others' provocations. He only wanted to fight against himself. The journey of cultivation was destined to be a lonely path. His biggest enemy was himself. Only through continuously challenging himself and breaking through his own limits could he persevere on this endless path and eventually reach the destination. These acts of shamelessly seeking personal gains would not move his heart the slightest bit. Standing in front of the machine, Feng Lin closed his eyes slowly and took a deep breath. Heaving out a long breath as long as a century, his entire body was breathing vigorously and maximized to his full potential. His body condition was also adjusted to the highest optimal level. Next candidate, Feng Lin. In a loud yell, Feng Lin opened his eyes fully. A white beam flashed in the air. The next second, his body moved speedily. Everything from static to full speed happened in the split of a second, giving people an illusion that he teleported. A tweaking, sharp sound was made as he sprinted with all his strength. His steps were flying on the track and rubbing against it as if it was on fire, giving out a burnt rubber smell. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds. Tick, tick, tick. 100 meters sprint results were out. It was 4.21 seconds. What? 4.21 seconds? Many students witnessed this scene. They rushed over and gathered around the speed tester. They kept rubbing their eyes, thinking that the machine was faulty. Based on scientific calculations, normal humans would meet their bottlenecks in speed and strength regardless of the vitality. 100 meters in 4 seconds and punch strength of 2 tons, this was the limit. Once you had exceeded this limit, it would exceed a mortal man's body-bearing capability and make the body collapse. Only by becoming an official cultivator could one break through this limit with the extraordinary force that transformed the body from inside out. This was also known as mortal limits. Now, Feng Lin's running speed was approaching the mortal limits. Was that achievable by someone with only vitality of 1.5? He was faster than someone with a vitality of 2.2. That was not genetic at all. Everyone who witnessed the scene nearly dropped his jaw. Yet, Feng Lin was not surprised at all. Different genes had a different emphasis on a human's body. Monkeys were so agile. The monkey gene that he awakened had no supernatural power, but it would greatly improve one's agility. Feng Lin strengthened his agility by 9 points, which no one had ever achieved. His speed was advanced up to the limit, and it was unimaginable. However, Feng Lin was confused. He had a superb speed and was faster than Zhao Kai, but why was his vitality so much weaker? It seemed like there were still undiscovered secrets about the gene strengthening relating to vitality's improvement. The exam was still ongoing now, thus, it was not the time to think about this. He put this question aside and started the strength exam. Bang, bang, bang. He bowed and bent his body. A loud crackling sound could be heard from deep inside his bones. By focusing his energy to its absolute maximum, he made the punch. The punch roared like the thunder. In a while, a continuous series of punches hit the punch force machine like a thunderstorm. The machine shook feebly and squeaked, unable to withstand the great force. A long chain of numbers appeared on the screen. Every candidate had to strike 100 punches within a certain period of time. Besides testing the punch strength, it tested the endurance. Going all out to give 100 punches, he had to keep the consistency of every punch besides using the maximum force. By doing that, he could get high marks in the test. Feng Lin had a great lung capacity. After 100 thunderstorm-like punches, he was not panting despite feeling tired. Punch strength 0.8 ton. The machine was stating the actual data. What? Average punch strength 0.8 ton? That is almost 1 ton. Also, his running speed is so scary, 100 meters in 4.21 seconds. How did he train himself? His vitality is only 1.5, but his speed won over Zhao Kai, who is 2.2. His strength isn't weak too. This is simply not scientific. Everybody was taken aback. How is that possible? Zhao Kai was perplexed. Feng Lin's performance has surpassed all his knowledge about genetics. His speed was extremely fast, and his strength was not bad too. However, why was his vitality only 1.5? Did he cheat again? This was impossible. The machine was an object, how could it help him to cheat? Dark horse, he is definitely a dark horse. He is the second cultivation genius in our class. Another genius had appeared in the class. Thus, the female head teacher could only put all her prejudice aside and looked highly upon Feng Lin now. As a head teacher, it was a massive fortune for her to have a new genius in the class. The previous prejudice? It was not important. The key point was the present moment. As long as you were capable, who would bother about how you had used to be like? And this was the transformation caused by an examination. Feng Lin had just shown his budding talent. He made everyone acknowledge that he, who was previously unknown, low-graded student, was finally on his way rising to the peak.